As we get you ready for back to school, if you think there's too much standardized testing, you'll be happy to hear the new state superintendent agrees.
Our Joanne Purton sat down with Brian Whiston, who not only talked about the testing, but also how to get kids to take more ownership of their educations and what should be done to improve schools in Detroit.
Grade Michigan schools for us, can you?
Well, I think there's a lot of teachers in the classrooms doing a lot of great things, but if you look at our overall numbers, we're nowhere where we want to be. You know, if you look at most statistics, we're at the bottom of the third of the states.
Brian Whiston hopes to change that in his new role as state superintendent. His goal, to make Michigan a top 10 performing state in the next 10 years.
We really need to create a laser-like focus on what's happening in the classroom.
And that, he says, includes teachers helping students take a vested interest in what happens in the classroom.
We need students to set goals for themselves and then track how they're performing on those goals and know what their reading level is and know where it should be, and they should be graphing and setting goals and how they're going to get there.
Testing, of course, a hot button issue for many parents, teachers and students who say there's simply too much of it, taking away from learning. In one of his first moves, Whiston has cut the time spent on the M-STEP for 11th graders by 8 hours and 2.5 hours for 3rd and 4th graders and 6th and 7th graders. Our schools give kids both the M-STEP, which is the state standardized test, and a local test like the NWEA to measure their progress. Whiston would ultimately like to see just one test.
We need an assessment like NWEA that tells us, did we get a year's growth or not? And that's how we ought to hold schools accountable, because that's what's important to parents.
We talked about Detroit Public Schools in our wide-reaching conversation. Whiston says he'd like to see power restored to an elected school board and the state to help the district with its debt. Addressing poverty in Detroit and other districts is also essential to academic success.
Never to use poverty as an excuse, but we have to, if we're not going to be honest about the impact poverty has, we're never going to improve education.
Whiston thinks relying on the state's per-pupil allowance simply isn't enough.
Whether it's through an additional foundation grant to those students who are in poverty or a 31A funding, however we want to do it. But yes, poverty does matter, and yes, students who are growing up in poverty situations, we need to spend more money on them.
As the school bell rings this year, there will be far fewer students than there were over a decade ago, down from 1.7 million to 1.5 million now. Why? Well, we're having fewer babies, and our recession caused many people to leave the state. Because schools are paid per pupil, it's creating a funding problem for many districts, like Farmington, which has recently laid off close to 200 employees and is talking of closing schools. It's a challenging time in education, but a time Whiston believes is ripe with opportunities. Now, to become a top 10 performing state like he'd like us to be, Whiston is calling on business leaders, think tanks, educators, and the public to present their ideas. We have provided a link to the website where you can weigh in your thoughts on our website, WXYZ.com. He already invited all those groups to the August state school board meeting and is inviting them all to come back in September as well to offer up ideas. We all have to be in this together, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Good to hear he wants to know our thoughts.
Absolutely.
All right.
You're welcome.